Okay, Rabbi.
And Sarah teaches we're all destined to die. Share it with all who ever lived and all who ever will be. Cry for those who are gone. Hide not your grief. Do not restrain your mourning. But remember that continuing sorrow is worse than death. And the dead are at rest. Let their memory be a source of peace and be consoled when the soul departs. Death is better than a life with pain and eternal rest.
All right, let me get going. This is it's a funeral. I need
Let's
to,
not seek to understand
which is a whole other thing.
In
2 weeks, 3 weeks, what do you want to do?
From us, nor be
You want Tuesday, you want Wednesday?
For we have already been shown far more than we
Can you please mute your device?
As a drop of water in the sea, as a grain of sand on the shore, are our few days in eternity. The good things in this life last for only a short time, but Harvey's good name will live on forever.
Yeah, that's fine. Did you want the slot 11 o'clock? Well, listen, when you get
please mute yourself.
I'll be the third one to know. You, Meryl.
Everyone, please be quiet.
I want to text us.
God has given, but now taken away.
Yeah, I think it's time, but let's see let's hope for the best.
Harvey Bernard Rosenblum.
All right. I'll talk to you again in a few weeks. Yeah, bye-bye.
Chaim Benish ben Moshe Begittel is missed and mourned primarily and first of all by his beloved wife, Joanne, by his children, Aaron and Michael, Matthew and Stephanie, Laura and Mark, by his brother Stan and his wife Beth, by his brother-in-law Lester, by his grandchildren Kelsey, Jack, Max, Drew, Emma, and Gia, by his nieces and nephews Sue, Paula, Janice, Steve, Karen, and Lisa, by his many, many beloved friends, and especially the folks that he knew through the Beechwood Community Center. Mizmor David, Adonai Roi Lochzal, Binoteshi al Bitzeni al Mei Menuchot Yinahaleni, Nafshi Yeshovev Yanchineni V'Magle Tzedek L'Ma'an Shemo. God is our shepherd, we shall not want. God causes us to lie down in green pastures. God leads us beside still waters. God restores our soul. God guides us in the right paths for the sake of the divine name. And even when, as at this moment, we walk through the valley of the shadow of death, we fear no evil, for you, God, are with us. Your rod and staff comfort us. You prepare a table even in the presence of our enemies. You anoint our heads with oil, and our cup overflows. Surely goodness and mercy will follow us all the days of our lives, but we will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. Max, Drew?
When I was in fourth grade, I had an assignment, and I had to write a book. Well, I got most of my inspiration from Grandpa, because he was always the one who would tell me, read this book, read that book. He was he was the go-to. He had the best books for me to read, and he was my inspiration. I dedicated that book to him because he's the person I've always looked up to. I don't know what I'm gonna do without him. I had many moments, as I bet most of you did, with Grandpa, where when I got a bearded dragon, he called him a pterodactyl. When I started to grow over him, he would still call me Shorty, and we would joke about that. When I was younger, an ongoing joke in the family was I went to their house, and for Pepsi I said Dortmunder, and it's lived on. And when my brother was born, I walked into the house at 2 a.m. and I went up to Grandpa and I said, "Do we have some waffles?" I had many moments with him. I can't ever get him back, but I'm always gonna remember him. I could talk to him about anything. It's unexplainable how much I loved him. He always supported me through everything. I love him.
On 9/25/2020, my loving, caring, inspirational grandpa passed away. I loved spending time with him, whether it be eating dinner in person or telling the worst jokes over the phone. He was always saying how proud he was of me. We had a shared passion for food, cheesecake and donuts in particular, and I looked forward to being old enough to bake with him. I will have to keep the Rosenblum cheesecake alive. We're standing here today at his grave, remembering our shared good times with him. He will never leave us. He is everything and everywhere, meaning he is always here. We shall never forget the amazing times we had with him. I love him greatly. Thank you.
Harvey Rosenblum was my grandpa. He was such a wonderful person, and everyone here proves that. He had such a great personality, and he always loved his donuts and desserts. I remember he would always tell Grandma to sit down at the table because he would joke she didn't know how. Every Wednesday, sometimes not Wednesday, me and my sister would call him, and we would say, "What day is it?" He would respond with hump day. We'd say whoop whoop because that was like the commercial he had always loved. He was such a wonderful person. I'm gonna miss him so much, and I hope you all do too. He's here with us, I know it. We love you, Grandpa.
שיר למעלות עשייני ההרים, מאין יבוא עזרי. עזרי מעם אדוני עושה שמיים וארץ. We turn our eyes to the mountains. What is the source of our help? Our help comes from God, who is the maker of heaven and earth. God will not let our foot give way. Our guardian will neither slumber nor sleep. The guardian of Israel neither slumbers nor sleeps. God is our protection, a guardian at our right hand. The sun will not harm us by day, nor the moon by night. Adonai will protect us from all harm and look over our coming and going, now and forever. Harvey was, I'm going to turn a little bit, maybe do the, does that help, Steve? You good, Bob? Thank you. Yes, ma'am. If you'd like to, certainly. I don't know about that till right now. Matthew, come on. Okay.
I'm going to remove the mask. I'm going to eat it if I don't. How can I follow our kids? I should just not say anything else. They took all of our good thoughts, but I do have some things to say. When Dad was asked to speak at an event like our weddings, he'd start by saying something like this: "It's been said that when I talk, by the time I'm done, people have visibly aged." Many say that I have a lot of Dad's traits, and unfortunately for all of you, this is one. We're both talkers, but I'll do my best not to go on too long. This is a little bit of a collaboration, so I'll share some things from his brother, Stan, and some recorded interview comments that Laura captured a few months ago, as well as some personal thoughts. Stan was excited to learn that he would have a sibling. And after Dad was born, he'd often say, "I wanted a little sister and I got one. Her name is Harvey." He had a hard-working life, but was always optimistic, especially about his chances to win the lottery. He liked to laugh and make you smile. He was tough, confident, and a risk-taker in his youth. He listened, and he always loved to learn. He was very intelligent and a role model mensch. He was a source of inspiration, jokes, and fun. He was gentle, kind, giving, and caring. Even in the hospital, enduring a tremendous amount of pain and discomfort, he thanked every nurse and appreciated everything anyone did for him. From the day he was born till the day he passed, I would dare to say he didn't change very much. Of course, he got older, matured, made mistakes, got into trouble, built countless relationships. But what I'm talking about is the person he was. Luck wasn't always on his side, but he found a way. He found a way to build friendships, run businesses, whether as a newspaper delivery boy, stocking shelves at the Pick and Pay, running a bowling shop, apprenticing, and later running a typesetting business, partnering in a painting and wallpapering business, and most recently supervising many of the recreation activities for the Beecher Community Center. The person Dad was didn't change. He always remained a good person, a loyal friend, and someone who could make others smile. People loved him, and I mean loved him, for the man that he was and how he made them feel. Stan was disappointed he wasn't able to see his little brother as much as he wanted in his final days. After growing up in a 2-bedroom apartment where they shared the same room and missing a good part of their younger lives because Stan went into the Navy for 4 years and Dad went into the Army for 2 years, he said, "We fell over each other when we saw each other for the first time." And they reconnected after military service was behind them. Dad's service time was not easy. And while he could have had a long military career, a 13-month stay in Korea after the war ended and the strong possibility of being shipped off to Vietnam drove him to make a hasty exit when the opportunity presented itself. While in Korea, he said shots were still being fired, even though the war had ended. However, those situations were covered up so that the news wouldn't report it and end up starting another war. It's easy to understand why he was very glad to return home. Stan says, Dad could find trouble, or rather trouble found him. He remembers Dad swinging from a rope in a tree until the rope broke, and then when he fell, he broke his arm. He said they'd shoot BB guns at rats in the sewers, and yep, that's really tons of fun. But keep in mind there was no internet, cell phones, video games, or TV back then to keep them out of trouble. They would make balsa wood airplanes and then set them on fire and try to fly them. Growing up, Stan said Dad would create the problem and then Stan would get beat up for it because Dad was too young, 5 years his junior. But Dad told me about a bully that lived on their street. Someone who nobody wanted to stand up to. But Dad decided someone had to. Something had to be done. So he finally put her in her place. Stan and Beth, about over 60 years ago, both remember getting a call for help from Dad. It didn't matter that they were on their way to attend a wedding. Dad needed help. He had just broke his nose during a softball game. Why did he call them and not his parents? Because he wasn't supposed to be playing at that time. But Dad did what he wanted to do. When Stan and Beth's oldest daughter, Janice, was born, sorry, Janice, they asked Dad and his good friend Jerry Rosen to babysit. Well, Dad was very smart and good at a lot of things, but for some reason he couldn't figure out how to change a diaper. After a panic call and some detailed instructions provided over the phone, Stan said Dad was now ready to have kids of his own. Stan is very proud of the fact that when Dad decided to leave the printing business, he helped him find his next career path as a partner for a painting and papering business. He spent the next 20 years partnering with Jay, Stan and Beth's son-in-law, decorating many people's homes around the city, including many projects he completed at his kids' homes too. Dad's next career move was once again guided by family, and this time it was Beth who led him in the right direction. When she needed someone to supervise the Beechwood recreation programs, she said they should turn to Harv. Beth said he was very diplomatic, but had the confidence to accept responsibility for addressing an issue and resolve it. He kept things calm, and she said he was the right man for the job. Almost 25 years later, he was most definitely the right man for the job. He worked there until COVID hit this year, and if it wasn't for the cancer he suffered from these past 7 months, he would still be there today. Dad wasn't ready to retire and would tell us, when you retire, you rust. One of the most moving comments Stan shared with me is that he never had an argument with his brother. They disagreed, but never argued. They grew closer after Dad and Mom married, and they loved each other very, very much. Stan said he was a wonderful brother and a friend. I'll always love and respect my little brother, Harvey. Beth offered a thought too that I want to share with you. She said, you don't have to be rich monetarily in order to be rich. And while Harv hasn't achieved the financial success he hoped to, he was very rich. He had a lot of family and friends that loved him and still do very, very much. Dad worked hard. In his interview with Laura, he talked about having worked on the weekends from 7 a.m. till 10 at night. He shared with me that they would play a doubleheader baseball game during the day and then play 36 holes of golf into the evening. He worked hard, but he played hard too. Dad had lots of interests, including his love for baseball and his favorite team, the Cleveland Indians, playing the lottery, learning the latest technology, and reading books. He loved to read books, and some of his favorites were Johnny Tremain and Black Beauty. When he was in the 5th and 6th grade, he read college-level books, and the teachers would ask for a book report. They couldn't believe his level of understanding. But when you asked Dad why he read those books, he simply said, I just like to read. Dad got me interested in reading around the age of 12, and it was a book called The Spell for Chameleon. We shared many stories and series of books after that one, and he enjoyed hearing where I was at in the story. He'd say, oh, just wait. Now it's going to get good. Many people who knew Dad can make the same claim. He helped generate a lot of traffic at the library and Barnes & Noble. In addition to books, his favorite old radio shows were The Shadow, The Lone Ranger, and The Green Hornet. He enjoyed Roy Rogers movies, and he loved Superman. Superman was his favorite. Telling jokes, sharing stories, and everyone knows the story Dad enjoyed telling more than any other. Have you ever heard the story of Nate the Snake? Most often you'd hear a groan, but if Dad found just one person who hadn't heard it, that was it. He got really excited, eyes open wide, big smile on his face, and he said, okay, once upon a time in a small town there was a large lever. I'm going to stop there. I can't finish it, but I can for anyone interested. I can't do justice telling the story the way that Dad did. And that's just it. It wasn't the story itself. Rather, it was the animated, passionate, excitable way that he told the story that the listener probably remembers more than anything else. And to tell the truth, Dad wasn't looking for the listener to love the story. Rather, the more the person groaned, the more he laughed and asked if he could tell the next story. Like, have I ever told you how to catch a turkey? That's another one I can tell you. But there was one thing he loved more than books or storytelling. One thing more than anything else, and that's Mom. Many have commented that their marriage was a fairy tale. One thing that Uncle Lester said, not only many times in the past, but heard again most recently. Joanne, Harvey worshipped the ground you walked on. At 129 pounds with a 29-inch waist, he self-described himself thin like a greyhound. They met for the first time on a blind date, and he said he loved her immediately. He loved being together with her. Said she was such a gentle person. She thought he was very handsome and very surprised when she saw him for the first time. With a name like Harvey Rosenblum, she was expecting someone a little shorter than her, perhaps a little bit more round around the middle. He was just the opposite. She said he was such a gentleman. Dad couldn't get enough of Mom's cooking, especially her pumpkin pie. And he told everyone she was a great cook, but an even better baker. Their courtship began in November of 1965, and he asked her to marry him in March the following year. I asked my wife just about the same period of time. You may think that Mom said yes, but then you don't know Mom very well. Making a decision is not Mom's strong point, but Dad certainly tried to help her develop that skill. He always said, don't ask me, it's up to your mother. So 2 months later, on May 11, 1966, he asked her again in her house. With a high-pitched tone, this time she said, yes. They were married on December 26, 1966, and loved each other as no couple could for more than 53 years. Dad said, I will never forget that it boggled my mind to marry someone so beautiful and nice. And while we all joked about his love for playing the lottery and someday hitting it big, he knew he had already won because Mom said yes. As a side story to the wedding, Dad shared that Ken Brennis was in his wedding party and at the time was dating a pretty good catch named Roz. Dad said he told Ken, you have to marry that girl. And Ken did. So I guess we can add matchmaker to his resume too. Dad wished he had made different career choices and should have pursued a path in science, math, medical school, or even followed a path with the post office. He tested at 98% with the post office, and his military experience gave him an additional 10%, so he scored well over 100%. And he could have done very, very well in that career. Mom said he could have been postmaster general. I'm sure he would have done a good job. Dad was very intelligent. He would read 3 books at the same time and was able to describe in detail everything that was going on in each story. Dad would take such pride in buying things for Mom or any of us once he got on a shtick. He'd tell us the details of his shopping trip to Macy's to find a bargain, the perfect sweater, or the jewelry he had asked to be made specially for Mom. It's hard for us not to see him by her side at the dinner table, holding her hand, doting on her, smiling at her from across the room, and just loving her. Mom was very lucky. She had won the lottery too. Dad was big into learning the latest technology, a new app, a better device, or maybe a shortcut tool. When Dad got in his latest shtick, he wouldn't buy just 1 box of fruit roll-ups, he'd buy 5. His granddaughter Kelsey remembered he'd buy a sheet blanket, and then he'd buy 1 for every one of the kids. Nope, just can't buy 1. He'd get a shirt for himself and 1 for me. And if there was a sale, it was the thrill of finding something at a cheaper price, something fun, something he could give to someone else, even if they didn't need it. He loved to give to others. Dad built strong relationships with everyone. He's had some friendships for over 60 years. Whether working with Jerry, arguing with Phil and Mort about baseball, or driving to Vegas with Ken. He had a lot of strong friendships, and I can't possibly cover them all here. But one in particular stands out, and here's another story. When he'd catch Anita Weinberg outside of her house, which was just a few doors down and across the street, he'd yell out, "Hey, Tony, baby!" And Anita would every time shake her head, put her head down, smile, and call back, "Hello, Harvey." Anita shared fond memories of Dad teaching her to learn to drive. Dad would say, "Just go. You're right. They'll get out of your way." She said he was very patient, and he helped her gain confidence. Dad enjoyed teaching, and Anita was one of his favorite students. Dad was a very loving father. He had a special, unique relationship with each of us kids. I could spend a while boring you with a lot more stories, but there's one that all of us remember and speak fondly of. The location didn't matter, whether the house, the car, a store, anywhere. It goes something like this. Dad would say, "Aaron, Matthew, and Laura, you know what?" Dad would pause. We were expected to respond. We replied, "We know you love our mother." And he would say either "That's right," or "Very much so." And Mom would reply, "Thank you," or "I love you too." This played a big part in our lives then, and my boys today know that I do the same thing. They know exactly how to reply today when I ask Max and Drew.
We love our mother.
Very good, boys. I think of Dad every time we do that. Dad would say, "I'll always be there for you. It doesn't matter what time of the day or where you're at. All you have to do is call and I will be there," and he meant it. Words we use to describe him again are gentle, kind, caring, loving, giving, intelligent, talkative, easy to get along with, patient to a point, helpful, friendly, a teacher, a role model, a hero, and a fierce protector of his family. As a grandfather, he played the fun guy role. He never had a harsh word for any of the grandkids. Rather, he enjoyed telling stories, trading jokes. You heard that shared by the kids today. Watching them play sports or in the band, discussing the latest book. Maybe cook some waffles or bake a small cheesecake. Exchange candy, eat a donut. He loved donuts. And just sit and talk. His grandkids loved him very, very much. His nieces and nephews loved him very, very much. His friends loved him very, very much. The Beecher community learned to love him very much. His brother loved him very much. And his wife, without a doubt, loved being with him more than anyone or anything. I started by saying you may visibly age by the time this is done. I hope for your sake you've aged well. I'm sorry if you have not, but I'd like to end with sharing something personal. I'm a strong believer that movies are loaded with significant statements and tend to steer our behaviors, guide our thoughts, and at times make such an impact that it leaves a lingering message in your mind that helps you realize something that you wouldn't otherwise have thought about on your own until it was too late. I apologize if you think this is corny, but it's the truth, and I feel this is relevant to share with you. In 1986, the movie The Karate Kid 2 was released. For those who know this movie, it involves a young boy, Daniel, who grows a strong bond with an older, peaceful Japanese man named Mr. Miyagi. Daniel followed Mr. Miyagi halfway around the world to see his father before he passed away. After the father passed, there's a scene where Mr. Miyagi is found staring into a beautiful sunset over the ocean. He's sitting on a large rock, and Daniel quietly walks up and sits beside him. Daniel considers whether he should speak or not, and finally decides to share the words that I've thought about for the past 34 years, hoping silently to delay the situation as long as possible. Daniel said, "You know, when my father died, I spent a lot of time thinking I wasn't such a good son. Like maybe I could have listened a little more. or spent more time with him together. I felt so guilty, like he did everything for me, and I didn't do anything for him. And then one day, I realized I did the greatest thing for him before he died. I was there with him. I held his hand, and I said goodbye. My heart is broken. Our hearts are broken. And an amazing husband, father, grandfather, brother, uncle, and friend was taken from us far too early. But at the end, not only was I there, but Dad was looking at Mom. Aaron and Laura were on either side. And I held his hand. We told him we loved him very much, many times. We told him it was okay to go to sleep. We kissed his head, and we said goodbye. We will all forever remember that moment as a family, that we were there at the end together, and we never let go until it was time, and he was ready to forever sleep. Dad, you asked me, never forget me, to remember to visit you and to tell your stories. I promise you, I will. We will. I love you very, very much, as we all do. Thank
It's very difficult to follow up. And I promise that my remarks will be shorter, but I did write some, and if you'll allow me just to share a few things. My daughter Kelsey and I were having a conversation recently, and she said to me that some people are very quiet and that they draw their strength from solitude. That's okay. And that there are other people who draw their energy from being around other people. They love to talk, they enjoy a great party, they love community gatherings, and they love to socialize. And the latter, as you all know, was very much my father. He loved his job and the people at the Beachwood Community Center. It was the perfect job for him. And he could have retired, but he didn't, because that would have sucked his energy away. I'll miss him walking me around the center and showing me all the different things going on there and the pride that he took so much in doing that job. He loved the art that was on the walls. He constantly pointed them out. There's Peter Max. He showed me the activity rooms where the community did yoga and Zumba. He loved going to the swimming pool, especially because my mom worked there, and I think he just liked to hang out with her. Other things that I'll miss about him, as Matthew mentioned, if he really loved something, he would buy 3 of them and he'd give it to each child. The sheep blanket, as he mentioned, was one that he got when I was in college, and my daughter Kelsey has that. And he'd show up with a Keurig machine or hand sanitizer dispenser, and Greg would always look at me and say, what do I need that thing for? And then a couple of days later, he'd come back and he'd say, I love this thing. I didn't know I needed it. But my dad never needed it. I miss the way he would say, donuts. I miss sharing pumpkin pie with him at Thanksgiving. And we love pumpkin anything. And in the end, it was the pumpkin Noosa yogurt that's new at Wegmans, or it was Whole Foods. And that was the last thing that he wanted, pumpkin yogurt. I miss telling him about my life because he was a good listener. I miss seeing the way he loved my mom. She was at the center of his world, and he would have done anything for her. And he would have done anything for any of us. He once said to me in high school, if you go to a party and you need me to come pick you up, just don't hesitate to call. And I did call him, and he came, and he said to me, there's no questions asked, and he took me home. He would have driven to Alaska to pick me up, and so it was an honor and a privilege to be able to take care of him this last week. I would have traded it for nothing. And the world. One last note about my dad. We would joke with him that he had vampire genes. He looked 10 years younger than his age right up until he got sick this past March. After chemotherapy, he lost his hair, and he wasn't too happy about that. But we noted yesterday at the funeral home that his hair had started to grow back. 80 years old, and his hair was still growing back. And I have to tell you, I thought, thank God, maybe I'll get to keep my hair a little bit longer. And that's good news for Jack and Max and Drew too. But unlike vampires, he didn't get to live forever. And while that saddens me, I know that he never wanted to outlive my mother. And he had a saying, may you live 1,000 years plus a day, and I 1,000 years minus a day. So I don't know what it's like to live without you. Rest in peace, Dad. I will always love you.
Atzur tamim polo kikod rachav mishpat. El emunah v'yinavo. God is the rock. God's work is perfect, and all of God's ways are upright and faithful. God is perfect in every way. Who can question God's deeds? Please rise. El malei rachamim, shochin b'maromim, hamitzei menucha nechona tachat kanfei hashchina, b'malot kedoshim u'tohorim, kezohar ha'afi ha'mazirim. Et nishmat Chaim Benish ben Moshe Gittel, shechalach le'olamo, v'garein tiyeh menuchato, ana bal harachamim, haskirein b'seiter knaftecha l'olamim, v'tzor b'tzor Chaim et nishmato, Adonai hu nachlato, v'yanuach b'shalom al mishkavo, v'nomar Amen. Exalted, compassionate God, grant infinite rest in your sheltering presence among the holy and the pure. The soul of Harvey Rosenblum, son of Berkowitz and Morris, he has now gone to his eternal home. Merciful one, may he find perfect peace in your sheltering embrace. May his soul be bound up in the bond of eternal life. May he rest in peace. And we say, Amen.
Amen.
Last peace shall Adonai go your way, for God has called you. Last Adonai go your way, and may God be with you. Last Lord Adonai go your way, and may the presence of God receive you. Kaddish, Yitkadal, Yitkadash, Rabah. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm gonna lower the cast of probably Kaddish Yittadal Yittadal Shnei Rabba Yomad Yibrach Yirutei V'Yamich Malchutei V'Chaye Echon V'Yomei Echon V'Chaye D'Kol Beit Yisrael V'Agala V'Zman Kariv V'Yimru Amen Yehei Shmei Rabba Mevorach V'Yolam V'Yomei Olmaya Yitbarach V'Yishtabach V'Yitpa'al V'Yitromam V'Yitnasei Yithadar V'Yitalel V'Yitalal Shmei B'Kudsha B'Richu Le'ela Min Kol Birchata V'Shirata Tush B'Chata V'Nechemata Da'amiran V'Yamar V'Yimru Amen Yehei Shalom Rabba Min Shemayim V'Chayim Aleinu V'Al Kol Yisrael V'Yimru Amen Oseh Shalom V'Romav V'Yaseh Shalom Aleinu V'Al Kol Yisrael V'Yimru Amen. May God, who brings peace to the heavens, bring peace to us, to all Israel, and to Harvey's soul. Hamakom Yinachem Etchem B'toch Sharav Le'Tzion Yerushalayim. May the presence of God comfort us, along with all the mourners of Zion and Jerusalem. The service is concluded. Shiva information is available on Berkowitz's website and also in your email. And those who wish to stay to participate in closing the grave may do so. Otherwise, you may return to your cars at this time.
So I want you guys to stay. Drew has a rock to give to you. Drew has something to give to you to put over here.